you're still with me? If so, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching this from? Maybe you're in a quiet kitchen in Saigon or wrapped in a blanket somewhere in Montreal. Either way, thank you. Let's step into this memory together. The sun had just dipped below the treetops when Elena stepped onto the porch with a glass of chilled tea. The sky was still glowing bruised purple with golden streaks brushing the clouds like a painter in a rush. She loved this time of day. The in-between, not quite evening, not quite night. The time when the cicadas started humming, but the stars hadn't yet gathered the courage to come out. Her chair creaked familiarly beneath her. She exhaled and sipped slowly, the jasmine notes settling on her tongue. The garden in front of her was overgrown wild with the kind of stubborn beauty that only comes from being left alone. And she liked it that way. Untamed, alive. Then she heard it, the low murmur of laughter. Not the TV, real laughter, male, younger. It floated from the house next door. Tom and Carol had visitors again. Their son Leo had come home for a few days. Eleanor hadn't seen him since last Christmas, and even then, it had been a fleeting hello across driveways. He was taller than she remembered, older, but his smile still had that boyish curve that made him look like he was always on the verge of some harmless mischief. She hadn't expected to see him that evening. But when he stepped outside, carrying a plate of grilled corn and a beer, and spotted her, his face lit up. "Hey, Eleanor," he called. She smiled. "Hey, stranger, back in town?" He nodded, walking to the low fence that divided their yards. "Just for a few days. Work's been insane, so I needed a break." She noticed the tiredness beneath his eyes, the kind people don't see unless they're looking closely. And maybe it was just the twilight or the weight of summer in the air. But something in his gaze lingered a moment longer than usual. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, nodding at the second chair on her porch. She hesitated. Not because she didn't want the company, but because she wasn't used to being seen anymore. But she nodded. "Of course. Just watch out, that chair bites." He laughed, hopping over the low fence with ease and settled beside her. For a moment, there was only the sound of ice clinking in glasses and the hum of insects. Then he turned to her, more curious than casual. "You ever think about leaving here?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. She looked at him sideways. "Sometimes, but not in a serious way." He nodded. "I used to think I'd never come back. I thought I'd escape and stay gone forever. But now I don't know, the noise out there gets loud." Elena tilted her head. "And what are you trying to hear underneath all that noise?" He smiled softly. "That's the thing. I don't know, but being here, it's like the static clears for a bit." His words settled between them like a stone dropped gently in a still pond. She felt it too, the hush. The gravity, the warmth of his presence was undeniable, but so was the careful distance he kept. The next day came with that same kind of quiet that only a neighborhood like theirs could hold birdsong distant lawnmowers, and the slow hum of a town that knew how to breathe. Elena stood in her kitchen, pouring herself another cup of lukewarm tea. The kind you make out of habit more than desire. She looked around at the stillness, the photos on the wall, the quiet tick of the clock above the sink. Since her husband passed 3 years ago, the silence had become familiar. Some days it felt like peace, other days like wait. Her kids were grown, living their own lives across the country. Christmases were video calls now. Birthday cards came late, if at all. The loneliness wasn't dramatic, it was just folded into things. Into the way her shoes sat neatly by the door, or the way no one interrupted her anymore. That evening, the neighborhood held its annual summer potluck down at the park. Elena almost didn't go. She usually brought her famous potato salad, smiled for an hour, then slipped out when no one noticed. It was a tradition, not joyful, just familiar. But this time, something tugged at her. Maybe it was the way the light poured across the floor that afternoon. Or maybe it was Leo's voice, still echoing in her mind from the night before. She put on a soft blue blouse she hadn't worn in months and walked the few blocks to the park. The place was alive. Children shrieked on the swings. Dogs begged for scraps. Adults gathered in clusters, arms full of foil-covered dishes, their laughter weaving through the summer air like music. Eleanor found an empty bench near the edge of the gathering, under the wide arms of an old oak tree. It was quiet there, shaded. She balanced a paper plate of pasta salad on her knees and took a bite, just as a shadow fell across her lap. "Mind if I sit?" She looked up. It was Leo, holding a plate in one hand and a crooked smile in the other. "Everywhere else is packed," he added. Eleanor shifted over, patting the bench. Plenty of room. He sat beside her, settling his plate. He wasn't the lanky teenager she vaguely remembered he'd filled out. Broad shoulders beneath a soft grey t-shirt. His face was older now. There were creases near his eyes when he smiled, not from age, but from thinking too hard. They sat for a few minutes in companionable silence. She noticed his hands, long fingers, neatly trimmed nails. Programmers' hands, maybe. But she wouldn't be surprised if they also knew how to hold a guitar. He caught her glance and tucked his hands beneath his thighs. Sheepish. "Your mom's macaroni and cheese is legendary," she offered, breaking the moment. He laughed, a warm, low sound that felt honest. "She guards that recipe like national treasure. I've been trying to crack it for years. Some secrets deserve to stay mysterious," she said with a knowing smile. He nodded, chewing. "So, you're Eleanor, right? My parents talk about you. I am, and you're Leo." The prodigal son returned. He chuckled, more like the burnt-out one, looking for real food and a break from deadlines. There was something fragile in his voice, a flicker of weariness just under the surface. They kept talking not about big things, just about the neighborhood. How the HOA banned wind chimes last year. How the Johnsons' Christmas lights stayed up until March. She told a story about her daughter's failed sourdough starter, and he countered with a tale about his anxious cat back in Seattle, who only drinks from the bathtub faucet. Nothing earth-shaking, but somehow it felt like more. There was no flirtation, not in the way people expect. Just that odd electric awareness, the kind that comes when two souls recognize something in each other. Not romance, not longing, just seeing. The evening wound down gently like a candle flickering to its final glow. Most families had packed up. Folding chairs clattered into trunks. Half-eaten watermelon slices lay forgotten on paper plates. The sky turned a deep lavender stars, beginning to pierce the dusk. Leo offered to walk Elena home. She hesitated only for a moment, not because she was unsure, but because she wasn't used to being asked anymore. They walked side by side, their pace slow, as if the moment might shatter if they moved too quickly. The streetlights buzzed overhead. A few crickets dared to sing. When they reached her gate, she turned to him with a gentle smile. "Well, home sweet home." Leo looked at the little white fence, the rose bush that hadn't bloomed properly in years, the porch swing that creaked when the wind was just right. "It looks the same," he said quietly. "But different too." She nodded. "That's the trick of time, isn't it?" He lingered, one hand in his pocket. "I'm glad you came tonight," she said. "Me too." A pause hung between them, heavy but kind. Then, with nothing left to say, he nodded and turned to walk away. Elena watched him go, not with longing, but with a strange sense of warmth, like discovering a book on your shelf you'd forgotten you owned. Familiar, comforting. She didn't go inside right away. Instead, she sat on her porch swing and looked up at the stars. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she was waiting for something to happen. She just felt here. The days that followed returned to their usual rhythm. Mornings with tea, walks to the market, crosswords half solved on the kitchen table. But something had shifted. She started noticing things, the way the breeze touched the curtains, the laughter of children outside, the feel of sunlight on her collarbone. She ran into Leo again. At the bookstore, near the coffee aisle, in the grocery store, once, at the local library where she found him sitting cross-legged on the floor, flipping through a photography book. Each time it felt like finding a pebble on the beach that someone else had skipped into your path. They didn't make plans. They didn't need to. Life found ways to loop them into the same spaces. One Saturday, Leo appeared at her door. He held a small dented metal box. "This," he said, "was in my dad's workshop. Thought you might want to see it." Inside were old film rolls, snapshots from neighborhood barbecues, blurry candids of porch conversations. And to Eleanor's surprise, a photo of her and her late husband dancing barefoot in the rain during a summer storm nearly 20 years ago. She hadn't known that moment was captured. Her breath caught. Leo noticed, but didn't say anything. "Would you like to go through the rest together?" he asked. And she did. The next few weeks unfolded like petals, slowly and quietly. Eleanor and Leo began to share small rituals. Coffee on Tuesday mornings, at the corner cafe, long walks on Sunday afternoons, when the world seemed softer, less demanding. They didn't talk about the past much. There was no need. One day, as they sat on a bench near the duck pond, the same one that had been there since their childhood, Leo pulled a folded piece of paper from his coat pocket. "It's a list," he said with a shy grin. "A list of what? Of things I still want to do before life sneaks away from me." He handed it to her. Some of the items were simple. Learn to bake bread from scratch, watch the northern lights, fix the old piano in Mom's house, say everything I meant to say before it's too late. She read it twice. Her finger paused on the last line. "Are you planning to do all of this alone?" she asked. "I was," he admitted, "but I'd rather not anymore." And just like that, their story began to change, not into something dramatic or sweeping, but into something quietly sacred. a late bloom, a second wind. One Thursday evening, Eleanor stood in her kitchen, kneading dough, her sleeves rolled up, hair a bit wild. Flour dusted her cheeks. Leo leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, smiling. "I didn't think you'd actually help me with this one," he teased. "I didn't think I'd still remember how. The bread didn't rise perfectly and the crust was too thick, but they laughed through the whole thing." Sometimes, laughter is what binds the cracks of an old heart. Later that night, as they sat on the floor, eating warm slices, he asked her quietly, "Do you ever regret it? Not doing all this sooner?" She thought for a long while. "No," she said. "If we'd done this years ago, we might have ruined it. We were different people then. I think we needed the years to soften us." Leo nodded. To hollow out room for each other. "Hey, are you someone who's ever found love or something like love later in life? Or even in an unexpected friendship? Let me know in the comments. These kinds of stories matter. They remind us it's never too late." Leo began playing the piano again. At first it was awkward. His fingers stumbled across the keys, like a child learning to walk. But Elena sat nearby often, with a book sometimes, just watching him in silence. One afternoon he looked up and asked, "Do you remember this piece?" He played the first few notes, a haunting melody they had danced to at a high school formal. Her eyes glistened. "I didn't think you remembered," she whispered. "I never forgot." That night they didn't speak much. But the air was thick with memory, not regret, but the kind that lives just under the skin. The kind that lingers like old perfume in a closed drawer. A few days later, Eleanor brought out a box she hadn't touched in decades. Letters, photographs, old notebooks. She spread them out on the living room floor like puzzle pieces. "Here," she said, "help me remember." Leo sat beside her, picking up one photo at a time. Him with braces. Her in a dress she swore she'd burned. They laughed and groaned and paused too long over certain names. One letter unopened stopped him. "What's this?" She looked down. Her breath caught. "A letter I wrote to you. The summer you left. You never sent it. I didn't think it would matter." He opened it. Read it. Silently. And when he finished, he simply said, "It would have changed everything." She looked at him. "Would you have come back?" "No," he said. "But I would have carried it with me. Like I carried you." Quick question for all of you, watching from around the world. Have you ever found an old letter, a photo or message that made you pause, made you wish you could go back? Even just for a moment, let me know where you're watching from, and if you've had a moment like that. The next morning, Eleanor found a note on her windowsill, written in Leo's unmistakable scrawl. "Come with me today." No questions. She did. They drove 2 hours into the countryside, parked near an old lake, walked a quiet path, and at the edge of a cliff, Leo turned to her. "This is where I decided to leave all those years ago. I thought if I left fast enough, I could outrun who I was." "And did you?" she asked gently. "No, but I ran straight back to you." That evening, back in the quiet of Eleanor's kitchen, Leo finally said it. "I was scared. Of failing you, of becoming my father, of not knowing how to be good to someone who deserved good." Elena didn't speak right away. She reached out gently, brushing a hand across his wrist. "You were never him," she said softly. "You just didn't know that yet." silence wrapped around them, thick and warm like a blanket, worn thin from use. Some truths didn't need echoing. They simply sat in the space between two people who had been broken and found each other again anyway. Days became weeks. Leo began composing a new song, one note at a time. He called it The Stillness Between Us. Elena painted again, soft blurred shapes of places she dreamed about but never saw. They never called each other lovers. That word felt too new, too young. But there was love. And there was care. And there was the gentle, undeniable miracle of two people choosing not to run anymore. If you're watching this right now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had someone come back into your life after a long silence? Did it heal you, hurt you, change you? Let me know in the comments. And tell me where you're tuning in from. I love knowing who you are and how far these stories reach. One night, Leo lit candles, not for romance, but for memory. I want to show you something he said. He pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was a bracelet. Worn, faded, but unmistakably hers. "You kept this?" she asked, stunned. "I found it the day you left it, on my porch. I never wore it, but I kept it. I didn't want to forget how it felt to be loved like that, even if I didn't know how to return it." Elena looked down, overcome. "You didn't forget me then, not for a day." Later they sat by the fireplace, wine in hand toes, tucked under an old wool blanket. Leo stared into the flames. "I keep thinking about time," he said. "How much we wasted." "No," Elena said gently. "We used it. We survived it. And now we're here." They didn't kiss that night. But in that quiet, flickering room, they didn't need to. As spring gave way to early summer, Eleanor and Leo settled into a rhythm that felt almost sacred. Mornings were for coffee and silence. Afternoons for creating her with brushes him with chords. Evenings often passed without words, only the sound of piano keys or paint water being swirled in a glass jar. They never declared anything. No labels, no "what are we now" questions. But every so often, Leo would brush her shoulder as he passed behind her, and she would lean in just slightly, as if her body remembered a closeness she wasn't ready to name. One evening, a letter arrived. No return address. Just Eleanor's name, written in neat, uncertain handwriting. She opened it carefully, read silently, folded it twice, set it down. Leo noticed the shift in her eyes. Bad news. She shook her head. Not bad, just old. It was from a man she once loved. A man she nearly married. He was dying, and he wanted to see her one last time. Leo said nothing at first. "Then will you go?" "I think I have to. Let me pause and ask you something, friends watching right now. If someone from your past reached out like that, someone who once broke your heart or nearly changed your life, would you answer the call? Let me know in the comments. And where are you watching from tonight? These stories are always better with you here." The next week she went. It wasn't a dramatic reunion. There were no tears, just a man in a quiet hospice bed, and a woman who once imagined forever with him. He told her he was sorry for everything, and that part of him had always hoped she'd find someone who deserved her. "I think I did," she whispered. When she returned, Leo was waiting by the window. She didn't need to explain. He didn't ask. He simply took her hand and said, I'm glad you went. Later that night, Elena wrote a letter she never sent. It read, Leo, we are made of the same sadness and hope. I used to think love had to look like fireworks, like drowning in someone. But now I know it can look like two hands holding the silence. Like choosing each other in the quiet every day. If I never tell you anything else, let me tell you this. You brought me back to myself. She folded the letter, slipped it into a book of poems, and tucked the book under Leo's pillow while he slept. A few weeks later, the world around them changed. Not in the way of earthquakes or grand announcements, but in the subtle shifting of priorities. Elena began painting less for galleries, more for herself. Her brushstrokes became bolder, more chaotic, as if she was no longer trying to be understood, only to be honest. Leo, meanwhile, stopped composing for commissions. He spent his afternoons sitting by the open window, playing chords that had no name. His music, once precise, became like breathing, imperfect, but alive. And for the first time, they began to speak of the past without trembling. Elena, he said one night, as they sat on the floor, backs against the couch, wine half finished, do you believe we were meant to meet? Or did we just happen? She turned to him slowly, her fingers brushing the rim of the glass. I don't think it matters, she said. Meant to or not, we're here. We showed up, and to you watching from wherever you are, maybe from your bedroom, your balcony, or a quiet train ride. Have you ever wondered that too? Whether the people in your life were destined to arrive, or if they just stumbled into your story and stayed? Let me know. Down in the comments. You might be surprised how many others are wondering the same. They didn't mark anniversaries or draw heart shapes on calendars. But there were little things like how Leo started leaving a note in Elena's pocket every time she went to the market. Silly things. Don't forget to get snacks. And also, you're beautiful. Or, if you see a watermelon, think of me. Elena, in return, began drawing little faces on his teacups in dry erase marker. One looked like a cat. One looked like him. They weren't grand gestures, but they were steady. And in a world that often confused chaos for love, steadiness felt revolutionary. Then came the silence. It began with a headache Leo said wasn't serious. Then more headaches, more pauses between his songs, a tremble in his left hand that hadn't been there before. Doctors, tests, that sterile white room full of verdicts. When they said neurological disorder, Elena's heart didn't break all at once. It unraveled slowly, painfully, like a sweater caught on a nail. Leo didn't cry when he got the diagnosis. He laughed. Not the joyful kind, the kind that tries to swallow panic before it reaches the throat. Typical, he said. I finally start living right, and now my brain decides to take a holiday. Elena didn't laugh. She just stood there, arms folded, as if holding herself together with crossed limbs. You're not dying, she said quietly. Not yet, he replied. And then they sat down on the floor like children who didn't know how to handle grown-up news. Leo started keeping a journal. Not for himself, for her. He wrote in it each day, sometimes just a word to daylight. Or music. Still music. Other days, he filled pages with memories from before they met. Stories about his grandmother's kitchen, his first heartbreak, the time he stole a record player and returned it an hour later with an apology letter. Elena never asked to read it, but he always left the book on the nightstand, just in case. Hey, if you've made it this far into the story, thank you. You're still here, and that means something. I want to know, have you ever kept something like Leo's journal, a letter, a playlist, a secret diary for someone you loved? Share with us in the comments. And if not, maybe today is a good day to start one. They learn to adjust to the new rhythms. Leo would forget things, small things. The kettle left on, the date, sometimes her name. The first time it happened when he called her Claire instead of Eleanor, he turned to her horrified, but she just smiled and kissed his forehead. Claire sounds elegant, she whispered. After that, they gave each name a story. Claire was a French librarian, Martha an opera singer, Jess a birdwatcher from the Scottish Highlands. It became their strange little game, rewriting the endings of their days with kindness. But no matter how playful they were, the truth loomed. There were days when Leo didn't come out of bed. Not from sadness, but confusion. He didn't know where the light switch was. He didn't recognize the painting above their bed, the one Eleanor had made the week they first kissed again. One evening, Eleanor stood outside the bedroom, holding the journal in her hands, trembling. Inside it, Leo had written, "If I forget your face, show me the painting. If I forget your voice, play me the song. If I forget everything, sit with me anyway." The seasons turned the way they always had, but to Elena time no longer felt linear. It bent and stretched around Leo's fading memory. Some days he was sharp as winter air, other days foggy like a humid August dawn. He still painted though, not with precision, not anymore. His brushstrokes were wild and childlike, but filled with feeling. Bold yellows, unapologetic blues, colors that spoke louder than words could. Elena hung his paintings all over the apartment, even the ones he said were mistakes. "Your mistakes are still you," she told him. One rainy afternoon, Leo turned to her and asked, "Did we ever fall in love?" She blinked, taken aback. "What do you mean?" He furrowed his brow. "I know we're together. And I know I like being with you. But did we ever fall in love?" Elena didn't answer right away. She just took his hand and placed it over her heart. Every day she whispered, "You fall in love with me every single day, sometimes for the first time." And that night, Leo wrote a single word in the journal, "Begin." Have you ever loved someone who forgot the version of themselves they were with you? It's a strange kind of grief, isn't it? But also a strange kind of gift. If you're watching this and you've lived through something like this, or you're in it now, leave a in the comments. You're not alone. Later that week, Leo began wandering at night. At first, he would just get up and stand by the window, looking at the moon, like it owed him an answer. But soon he started unlocking the front door. Elena would wake to the sound of it, creaking open, rush to him in her robe and gently guide him back to bed. "Where were you going?" she asked once. He looked at her blankly. "Home." "You are home," she said, eyes wet. "Then why do I feel lost?" he murmured. That night, she taped a photo of them, laughing wind in their hair, to the front door, just above the handle. Underneath it, she wrote, "Stay. You are loved." And just like that, we found ourselves back where it had all started on the patio. Two chairs angled ever so slightly toward one another, as if the breeze had nudged them that way on purpose. The jasmine was in bloom again, more fragrant this year. Or maybe it just seemed that way, because Liam was back. Hey, before we go on, where are you watching from tonight? Drop a emoji if the night has already settled over your city, or if you're still catching the last light of day. I love knowing where our stories are reaching hearts. Now back to Sarah. Liam leaned forward, his hand resting on the armrest that separated them barely. The warmth coming from him was subtle, like sun-soaked stone just after sunset. Sarah's heart thudded a little faster, an old rhythm awakened from slumber. It was foolish, perhaps, or maybe just unexpected. She was older and he was, well, her neighbor's son. Yet the space between them didn't hold judgment. It held something else, entirely something tender and impossible to categorize. He didn't lean in. He didn't reach for more than the moment was offering. His eyes held a question, yes, but wrapped in reverence, not pursuit. It wasn't the gaze Sarah had grown wary of over the years. This one didn't reduce her to an age or a label or a story someone else had written. In his eyes, she was just Sarah, a person, a woman, a soul with her own timeline. And then he reached out, not a caress, not even a proper touch. Just his fingertips barely brushing the back of her hand on the chair's arm. Like electricity meeting the ground, subtle, silent, but undeniable. Her breath caught. Not from shock, from recognition. She didn't pull away. She couldn't. It lingered for only a moment, that point of contact. But when he pulled his hand away gently, as a leaf leaving a branch, something stayed. A current, a knowing, a yes, even if it would never be spoken aloud. He smiled, faintly. There was sadness there. "My flight's Saturday," he said. 3 words. But they sat heavy between them. Like the final line of a poem you didn't want to end, I know, she replied. And that was enough. They didn't speak more of it. The silence said everything that mattered. That whatever had passed between them wasn't meant for a name or a future. It was meant to be witnessed, felt, remembered. When Carol and Thomas came back outside, it was as if the stars themselves politely stepped back. The magic, like all sacred things, knew when to make an exit. Liam left 2 days later. They said goodbye at the driveway. Nothing dramatic. A handshake, a small nod, and a glance that held more than any farewell ever could. "Thank you, Sarah," he said, for what she asked. "For everything. Safe travels, Liam. And don't wait so long to visit your parents next time." He smiled, got in the car, drove off. And Sarah, she didn't cry. Not because it hadn't meant something, but because it had. She felt full. Not broken, not lonely, just full. Full of something unnameable, but real. The house didn't echo the same way that night. The ticking clock sounded less like absence and more like presence. Like proof that time was still moving, and so was she. She made a cup of tea, sat by the window, watched the light come through the blinds in golden stripes. Even the rug looked different now, brighter. Time, as it often does, folded the days into each other, like soft linen, neatly, quietly, with no fanfare. Liam returned to his life, and Sarah returned to hers. But something had shifted. Something that refused to be folded away. She didn't replay their conversations, not out of avoidance, but reverence. The beauty of it had been its simplicity. A connection that didn't demand anything more than presence. A chapter that didn't need to continue in order to be complete. But every once in a while, perhaps, while folding laundry or watching a leaf drift past the window, Sarah would smile. Not the kind of smile that longs, the kind that remembers. And she began to notice more. The mailman had kind eyes. The barista down the street always remembered her name. The little girl who rode her scooter past the house every afternoon had a laugh like music. Liam had reminded her not just of who she was, but of how alive the world still was. How tenderness could bloom in unexpected seasons. How even a cracked teacup could hold warmth. She started painting again. Just a little, just enough. Not for a gallery, for herself. One evening, Sarah hosted dinner. Just a few neighbors. Carol and Thomas brought wine. The old man from across the street brought pie. They talked and laughed and lingered over candlelight, and Sarah felt it, that same stillness she had felt on the patio. That same warmth, not from Liam, but from herself. Because sometimes someone walks into your life, not to stay, but to stir. To awaken the corners you thought were dust-covered and done with. They leave, yes, but they leave open windows. And it's in that fresh breeze that you finally remember you were never too old, too late, too far gone. You were simply waiting for spring. Are you still here with me, friend? If you've listened this far, I want to say thank you. Not just for your time, but for your heart. If you've ever had a moment or a person or even a fleeting glance that made you feel seen again, leave it in the comments. I'd love to know you're still walking with me through stories like this. Wherever you are, whether it's sunrise or midnight, I hope this story left something gentle in you. And if you ever feel forgotten, remember this. Sometimes being remembered by yourself is the most important kind of remembering. Until next time, stay soft, stay listening, stay you.